G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we are here to preview round 2. A couple of big matchups to get into today. We'll get through a couple of the big games, get into our tips, but let's get into the first game. It is the game we will be live streaming on the channel this week. It is a Thursday night contest between Carlton and Hawthorn, and let's start with the Blues because it is such an important week for them. Do I think they have a chance? Probably not. I really don't think they do. I think that their game plan has been so stale for a while now, especially going forward. They were very, very poor last week, to say the least. And they're coming up against one of the hottest teams in the comp in Hawthorn. Carlton will respond. I think that's a pretty safe bet. How much they respond, I can't see it being anywhere closer than a 30-point game. I think that Hawthorn will win this one pretty comfortably in the end. The bets say they are $1.40 Hawthorn. Carlton are $2.96. I think it could be worse than that. To be honest, I think how this game will play out is that Carlton will have a pretty strong first term. May not be in front, but will keep it close. And then I think Hawthorn will slowly but surely just push them down into a point where they will get beaten by 6 or 7 goals, to be honest. I think this will be a pretty easy win for Hawthorn. Their defence is so solid. I think they'll easily combat Carlton's way of going forward, just bombing high and long. I think the Battle, Barras, and even Sicily, if he plays down back, will just easily intercept mark. We saw that against Sydney a couple of weeks ago, so I think they'll just play that easily. And then up forward, their small forwards are way too dangerous. So I think Hawthorn win this one by 6 or 7 goals, to be honest, at a minimum. After that, we get to the Friday night game between the Bulldogs and the Pies. This is at the MCG. It is a Bulldogs home game. I believe it's because it's an anniversary game for them, the 150th year celebration. So it's still, it's a home game for the Dogs, but I mean, it's a Collingwood home game, another one, let's be honest. Collingwood were very good last week against Port Adelaide. I do think that Collingwood will go far this year. I do think that the Bulldogs had a very good win last week as well. I think it was a very underrated win. I don't think many people are talking about how well the Bulldogs did. They had so many of their big players out, and the fact that they were able to show up against North Melbourne, who there were quite a lot of expectations around North this year, and the Dogs dealt with them pretty convincingly in the end. They stayed in front the whole night. Ed Richards looks like a really good prospect going into this season as a midfielder. We saw him a little bit last year playing in the mids. I definitely think there's a chance that he could be an All-Australian smoky at the end of the year. He does bring something different to that Bulldogs midfield, and I think that he could be something this year for them. Bailey Dale was brilliant as well. And I did like the look of Aaron Norton and Sam Darcy up forward. I do like the two-prong forward line. We'll see how that happens when Jamara comes back, but I do like the way that they were lined up in this game. I do think that they may struggle against the 3 tools of Collingwood in Myercheck, McStay, and Membry, so I have to wait and see how that plays out, and it'll be interesting to see if someone goes to Nick Dacos. We saw he had a very good game against Port Adelaide on the weekend, despite having a bit of a matchup with Willem Drew. I think that the Bulldogs' decimated defence could face some really hard times down there with a dangerous Collingwood forward line. I think their midfield can stack up, but I think if Nick Dacos gets on top, I think the Pies will win. And that's where I'm going with this tip. I'm going to be tipping Collingwood. I think the Dogs had a good win last week, but it was against a lesser opponent. I think Collingwood being a team that I think is going to be up there when the season gets to a close, I think that Collingwood win this one, and I think they'll win it pretty well in the end. Next, we get to Sunday game, the Sunday mid game. It is North Melbourne v Melbourne. Now, the reason I want to talk about this one is I think this is a very interesting contest. Now, this is played at Marvel, so at least Melbourne won't look like they're playing in front of no one at the MCG, but nonetheless, I think this is a very interesting contest. North Melbourne showed some good signs last week, but I did say it in the review, they have to start winning games. There's no more of this, oh, you know, we were gallant in defeat and that sort of stuff. They need to start winning games. They've finally got a list that has experience in winning games. You look at Parker, Daniel, that they've brought into the club, and then they've got these younger guys who want to start winning games. They need to start winning. I think there is a chance they can get their first win of the season here, North. However, Melbourne looked extremely good against the Giants last week. They had so many opportunities to win that game, but just unfortunately the Giants won in the end, pipped them at the post. I think if North Melbourne can get lucky to kick some goals, he kicked 5 in his first game of the season, so I mean, if he can kick another 5, that'd be brilliant. You can't really bank a player on getting 5 every week, though. North Melbourne have to find some other avenues to goal. And if Cam Zurhaar kicked straight last week, they have a much more of a chance of beating the Bulldogs. He 1 goal 4. If they can find some goals out of Zurhaar, out of Curtis, and then their midfield as well, I think they can win this game. However, I will be tipping Melbourne because their performance last week really almost shocked me to an extent. I thought they'd take a while into their season to show some good signs that they've rebuilt into a better team than what they were last year. The likes of Oliver, Petrarca looked really, really good. Their forward line looked pretty solid as well, and their defence stood up even without Stephen May. So I think Stephen May should be back this week. That's why I'm picking Melbourne. I think they look very good. They kind of surprised me on their performance against GWS in round 1. So I'm going to be picking Melbourne. They showed a little bit better signs, but North, I think they have a chance in this game. And then finally, we get to Fremantle v Sydney. What a contest this is. Two teams that are expected to be up the top throughout the season, both losing their opening games. Sydney losing their second game against the Lions last week. They were without Shea Bolton, the Dockers. They were without a bit of run, but they were without a lot of heart in that game against the Cats. I thought maybe they had a bit of a chance in that third quarter when Murphy Reid went crazy with those 4 goals in 10 minutes. But it seemed like that point in the game was the only highlight for the Dockers. They got smashed. Their midfield of the Cats just dominated, and they lowered their colours, the Dockers, I would say. It was round 1. They were expected to do big things this year. They were kind of questioned after that Indigenous All-Stars game, but they shrugged it off saying, they weren't playing at their best. They were not trying to show the competition what they're made of. And in that trial game against the Demons, they looked a lot better. But their first game of the season against the Cats, they had an opportunity to show some good signs, and they can't even make the excuse that they had a game in hand, the Cats, because they had the week off. The Dockers, I think, should have had a very good performance, but they didn't show a lot. Now, this week, we'll see what happens. Looking at Sydney, though, after the review, looking at it, I'm actually a little bit more disappointed in the Swans' loss against the Lions. Looking back at it, yes, Sydney had some chances to win that game, but Sydney should have never been in that position. I think that the Swans were very disappointing, the fact that they didn't win this game, because you got to remember, the Lions had such a hard week, 2 weeks basically. They had their game postponed, they've had training, they haven't been able to train at their facilities because of all the flooding after Cyclone Alfred, and then they've had to train in Sydney. So limited prep time, limited training sessions, and they still beat up on a team who had a game in hand. I'm very disappointed by the Swans' start to this year. The Tom McCartan move, I'm giving it 1 more week, and if it doesn't work this week, I'm moving him into defence. I know Dean Cox has his own spin on things as his new coach, but he needs to realise that if he loses 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row here, his season's gone. And if he doesn't get a win in the next couple of weeks, the heat's going to start to get to him. So if it doesn't work this week, he needs to say, okay, I got it wrong, chuck him back in defence, because this week is going to be very interesting as well. The Dockers' tall forwards in Amos and Tracy, and then the resting ruck, and it's either Reedy or Jackson. The Swans' defence don't really stand up here. I really struggle to see how the Swans win this game without McCartan going into the defensive 50 here and stopping one of their key tools for the Dockers. So that's the reason why I'm picking Fremantle, because I think their tall forwards will stand up. I think they will respond from last week's performance. I think that was a bit of a mulligan. I'm going to give them that. But that's where I'm really concerned about the Swans right now. But let's get to the tips. So, of course, my brother has given me his tips as well for this week, so we don't have to worry about that. My tips are Hawthorn over Carlton, Collingwood over the Bulldogs, the Crows over Essendon, Port Adelaide over Richmond, Geelong over St Kilda, Brisbane over West Coast, Melbourne over North Melbourne, and Fremantle over the Swans. And my brother's tips for this week are Hawthorn over Carlton, Collingwood over the Western Bulldogs, the Crows over Essendon, Port Adelaide over Richmond, Geelong over St Kilda, Brisbane over the West Coast Eagles, Melbourne over North Melbourne, and he's picked the Swans over Fremantle. Now, my brother's given a little bit of an explanation as to the difference as to why he's picked the Swans over Fremantle in Perth. He said the injuries to Fremantle are mounting up quite a lot, and the Swans have looked a lot better in the matches that they've played so far. So that's a little bit of an explanation. I tend to agree on the injury front, but also think the Swans are going to struggle with the key forwards of the Dockers. So that's the one difference we have in the tips this week. But of course, if you guys remember last week, we did have our certainty tips. And both of us got our certainty picks right for last week. I picked the Crows to beat St Kilda, and my brother picked Collingwood to beat Port Adelaide. Both of them are correct. We've both only got one certainty tip wrong so far this year. Can't remember. The certainty tips at the end of the year, we are going to tally up all the wrong ones, and that's the amount of chilies we're going to have to eat on the Boundary Riders Awards live stream night. But my brother got to pick first this week. His certainty tip is Port Adelaide to beat Richmond. My certainty pick is Fremantle to beat Sydney. So, of course, if you can't remember as well, the certainty pick, you have to pick a team that lost the previous week. You can't pick a winner. So that's why he has picked Port Adelaide over Richmond. I've tipped Fremantle over Sydney. I almost changed my tip to Richmond after my brother said that, but I think that Port Adelaide will win that game. Let's get to the ladder for the tips on our channel. So at the top is a person who used his joker. So if you don't know what the joker is, basically you get double the tips that week. He's gone bold and picked the double the tips in round 1. He got 12, so that means he only got 6 tips. So not the greatest, considering a lot of us got pretty decent tips in the first round. So the top dog is on top with 12 tips after round 1. Looking at second, we've got Mateus. He is on 9 tips in total. He's on top with Lockie Footy Tips with the 9 tips as well. I'm currently in 16th spot with 7 tips. And that's the only 7 I've got because I got 7 in round 1, got 0 in opening round. My brother is sitting on 8 tips. All of them he got in round 1 as well. At the moment, I would say, I'm sorry to the top dog if you're watching, but at the moment, I'm saying Mateus is on top with the 9 tips. But like I said, guys, that's pretty much all we have for the preview to round 2. The stream this week will be, of course, the Thursday night contest between Carlton and Hawthorn, so make sure to come and join us. On the YouTube channel, of course, we go live every single Thursday. Make sure to check out our video essay as well on Dan Gorringe if you haven't already, or Richmond Gorringe, as he's now known, of course. So if you want to check that out, it's about his football career and then he's come to fame as a content creator. So if you do like that sort of stuff or like Dan Gorringe as a content creator, then make sure to go check that out. But that is all from me in this video for the tips for round 2 in the preview. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. But that's all from me, guys, so we'll catch you all next time.